my pleasure to introduce today's guest speaker. Victoria Kichuk has been a chocolate sommelier, writer, and tour guide for over 12 years and founded her own business, Beantown, a Boston-based chocolate tour and tasting company in 2017. Victoria's career highlights include serving as a corporate blogger for Lindt Chocolates and Hotel Chocolat in the UK, and being one of a handful of invited participants in the first ever Colombia Chocolate Week in 2019, organized by the internationally recognized organization Uncommon Cacao. Victoria was honored to receive a military challenge coin from the TAPS organization in 2022 for one of her programs, and she also presented chocolate programs at the WGBH Wine Food Fest, the New England Chocolate Festival, the Stay at Home with Chocolate Festival, the Chocolate Expo, the DC Chocolate Festival, and on Boston Public Radio. And a few fun facts to know about Victoria. Her birthday is May 15th, which is National Chocolate Chip Day, and she believes this is why chocolate was going to play a big role in her life. She had the great pleasure of selling $50 worth of chocolate to celebrity fitness personality Jillian Michaels. And she taught acclaimed chef Gordon Hammersley about the history of chocolate in Boston. BFFs, please join me in welcoming to the podium our chocolate expert, Victoria.
Thank you. I don't always remember all the funny little chocolate things that have happened in my life. There's so many. It's fun hearing them back to me sometimes. Hello. I know I mentioned this already, but I'm really grateful always to be in a room filled with folks of any kind, chocoholics or not, when they have good vibes and just kind of exude really great, positive, inspirational energy. I am very much an extrovert in terms of when the lockdowns happened in the pandemic, I was like, where are my people? I need energy. Where is everybody? So I'm really thankful to be here. As was mentioned, my birthday is May 15th, which is National Chocolate Chip Day if you Google it. But what's funnier still is, and why my mom says I was born with chocolate on my mind, is because the due date she was given for me was actually May 1st. My poor mother. They don't let babies do that anymore and let you go an extra 2 weeks, but I had to wait for just the right day, as it turned out. So she knows that there was a reason, and I know that it really is true that chocolate from the very beginning of my life has been really important. So no doubt a lot of you have been wondering, whenever you read the description or my little bio excerpt, what is a chocolate sommelier? Well, before I get into that, you probably are even just surprised to hear that's a legitimate job. I get that a lot. If you are surprised, I would, first of all, compare, just if you're familiar with sommelier in terms of what that person does with wine, you know that they are people that are very well educated about wine. They are people that conduct pairings and curate events and speak and liaise between consumers and winemakers. They're not typically people that are winemakers or vineyard owners necessarily, which is to say, in my respect, that correlates as well, because I'm not a chocolatier. I'm not a chocolate maker. I leave that to the professionals with those skill sets. I'm always available for quality control. And I do get to write chocolate purchases off on my taxes. So adult achievement unlocked. The thing about being a chocolate sommelier is that I do all those things that someone would do for wine with craft chocolate. So craft chocolate would be something that is different than probably most of the chocolate you've had in your life, as in it's not the type of chocolate you would find at the checkout line at the grocery store. They're things that are made in small batches, things that are made sometimes in micro batches, maybe 100 bars at a time, by people that are literally importing these magical beans and turning them into chocolate. So if you are, again, surprised to hear that tasting chocolate for a living, it was a viable career option, I know sometimes folks will say to me, they actually, upon hearing that, feel a bit of retroactive anger at their high school guidance counselor. If you are having that feeling, please don't spend too much time in that emotion, because what happens is we get to know each other, my professional development can become your reward. So how did I find my way to this? It's not a type of job that you hear about at career day at school, no doubt. My mom would tell you again that I just am very persistent with certain things. And my journey to founding my own business came through a very meandering path. I went to college in Boston at Emmanuel College and was a English communications major. So talking and writing was what I knew I could do. I always found that whatever I had to talk or write about, I would come across the best and the easiest if it was things that I was naturally interested in or enthusiastic about. I think all of us can relate very easily that there are probably aspects of your role in whatever you do that come very easily because it keeps you very interested. And in college, I really loved my school and ended up becoming a tour guide for the admissions office, giving prospective student tours on their tours of campus, never knowing that I would use this later in life. When I graduated, I initially worked in textbook publishing through the very tumultuous early 2000s when a lot of companies were getting bought out or shrinking or closing down certain offices. And I started freelance writing on the side in order to supplement that work. Always, always, always felt that the most interesting freelance gigs I could do were things about food. So restaurant reviews, food events, recipes, things like that. They weren't always the best paying gigs, but they were something that I could easily do. And as I was going along, certain things happened in the publishing world which led me to be at a crossroads of, well, do I want to keep looking for work in publishing or perhaps give freelance writing a full-time go of it? When that happened, I went freelance full-time, but realized I needed to supplement that with something else. If you know any freelance writers, you will often find they supplement through, perhaps they take tutoring jobs, perhaps they'll do marketing work. I happened to find a job listing that said, do you like people and do you like chocolate? And I looked and was surprised why my name wasn't in the job listing. Because I was like, I'm right here. So I applied and honestly thought that I probably wouldn't hear much because they did say in the job listing, hundreds of people apply for these roles. It was for a tour guide position at a food tour company that did chocolate tours. To my surprise, I did get a phone call, and it happened to be the day before my birthday, and they said, can you start tomorrow? They said, I hope you'll understand I have a chocolate cake waiting for me tomorrow. Can I start maybe next week? And they said, we totally understand, that's absolutely fine. Professional priorities. So that, unwittingly at the time, really was the first step into making this a career, because what I thought would be a summer gig ended up being about 7 years of contract work as a tour guide and an event facilitator specializing in chocolate events and education. Now, the person that owned that company owned many other companies, and at some point decided, you know what, I want to start some new things, I'm not interested in this anymore, and shut it down, and let me know in an email Yeah, it was not the best time, but it presented me with an opportunity that I never anticipated. Suddenly, a woman that had never taken a business class, had never ever thought she could become a business owner, never even fathomed that possibility, was presented with the idea that if you want to continue in this, if you think you have more to offer, you have to pave your own way. And so through a lot of consultation, I legitimately took about 2.5 months of talking to everyone I could get my hands on, whether it was people that I knew in the present or people I had encountered years earlier, anyone that I knew had owned a business, had managed businesses, had taken business classes, had invested in businesses. Literally everyone I could get my hands on. I called, I emailed, I said, can I just have you for 30, 45 minutes, and I want your honest truth. Do you think this is something I can do? Because the fact of the matter was, imposter syndrome was bubbling up already really hardcore in me. I really felt that these folks were gonna say, I don't know. Maybe you should tread carefully, Victoria. But the first person I spoke to was over ice cream, professional development again. And they looked at me and they said, you can do this. There's not even a question. Okay, that's good to know. The second person said that too, and the third, and the fourth, and then the ones I talked to on the phone, and then now you get to the 7th and 8th and 9th person, and they're all going, yeah, you can do this. Why are you even doubting? And when the 10th and 11th person says to you, you can do this, I started to think, why am I doubting? Why am I not thinking that this is something I can do? And so, armed with the varied and yet at the same time consensus opinion that this was something that I could do and do well, I circled my wagons and did all the things you need to do in order to launch at least this type of business, got a website together. I actually had the name Cocoa Beantown already because I had secured the URL years earlier. I started a chocolate blog. And if you're unsure, Beantown obviously is the nickname for Boston, cocoa bean being what you use to make chocolate. I had people say to me, how did no one come up with that before? I said, thank goodness they didn't. Because I can't think of a more perfect name than a company that does chocolate tours in Boston than to be Cocoa Beantown. And our logo actually happens to be the Boston skyline in chocolate bars, if you look on our website. Was actually designed by a friend who works for Sony PlayStation. So we had some good wagons that I was able to circle up. The journey from that point, from launch, has been really amazing, and I joked about not always remembering all the things, even though Cocoa Beantown will be celebrating 6 years in business in like a week. It has been something that it has surprised even me. I am not I am used to the notion of people being surprised that this is something that can be done and the parameters of what it entails, but it's also something that surprises me with how much comes into my lane in terms of the varied experiences. For example, was mentioned my trip to Colombia in 2019. I was invited by a chocolate maker who I got to know simply because I made sure when I was traveling on a holiday trip at a chocolate store in another state to stop in and say hello and introduce myself and just really kind of geek out, because really all I am really is a professional groupie of chocolate makers. They're like my rock stars. I go up to them like, oh my God, I love everything you've done. I had your last 3 special releases. They were so good. And they are very flattered, but they also are kind of like, you can calm down a little. So I made sure to introduce myself to this particular one and said, oh, I follow you on Instagram. Oh, I think I follow you too. The chocolate community on Instagram happens to be a very positive one. People tell me about unsavory aspects of social media, and I will say that chocolate community focus or the lens on social media allows me to have really positive, overwhelmingly positive experiences, which is really lovely. Chocolate people are the sweetest. But the connection initially was literally just I needed her to know, I love your work. You do great things. Your chocolate's beautiful. It's amazing. And I want to know how you got into it. And it turned out that chocolate maker, whose shop is down in Stuart, Florida, was originally from Walpole. And she has family still up this way. And we stayed in touch, and one day, after I had sent a Christmas card to all my chocolate peeps, that holiday season, a couple months later, it was probably February or maybe early March of 2019, she emailed me and said, hey, would you want to come on this trip to Colombia and visit cacao farms and learn about, the whole beginning part of the process? And I was like, I had to show other people the email. I was like, this is just an email that I got. That's really real, right? You're reading the same thing? And they said, well, you have to go. There's no question. And so someone that just a couple years prior to that was not sure what to do, what's next step to take in her life, had an experience in the jungles of Colombia, where I actually sat with a small group of folks, some were chocolate makers, a couple other chocolate educators like myself, some people that invest in cacao, and we sat in a village in the Sierra Nevada region of Colombia, visiting a tribe that had recently reacquired their land from the Colombian government and was finally able to start growing and harvesting their ancestral cacao that they had grown for hundreds of years. And we received a blessing from their tribal leader to tell their story when we go back to the lands that we came from. And I prefaced to this group, there were about 13 of us total, the night before this visit, when we were all sitting at a welcome dinner with a very similar vibe to what we had today. And I remember when I introduced myself to the group, I thought to myself, well, other than the chocolate maker, I don't know these people, they don't know me. I'm just gonna be myself. And if that means being a little chocolate geeky, that's okay, because if it gets weird, I won't see them again. But there's no reason to not, because being who I am was how I got there to begin with. And so I said to them, I'm Victoria Kichuk, I'm from Boston in the United States, and I run a chocolate education company. And I love chocolate, but I also am a really sentimental sort of person. I pick up on vibes really easily, and I feel things very strongly. So I feel the love of chocolate very strongly, but if at some point in the next 10 days, something gets maybe a little emotional, and you look over and you see me under my sunglasses going like this, if you're uncomfortable with displays of emotion, it's okay, talk amongst yourselves, I'll figure it out, but it's just how sometimes I can get about certain things, because these things do affect me very strongly. And wouldn't you know, when we were sitting under the great prayer tree that we were seated at in this jungle in Colombia, receiving a spiritual blessing from a tribe that has existed for hundreds of years to talk about chocolate and where it comes from and the people that we don't get to see or meet that have a hand in bringing this beautiful, joyful thing to us. I got really emotional. When that happens indoors, I always have to ask if places have flood insurance, but we were out in the woods, so it was okay there. And they had to translate to the tribe. First, someone said it in English, then they said it, well, I said it in English, then they said it in Spanish, and then it got translated to the tribal language to explain to the mamo, the spiritual leader, that it's okay, she gets very emotional. Don't worry, she'll be okay. And he was just kind of sitting there, just kind of nodded. And that's certainly an extreme example in terms of an exotic experience, but through these now 6 years, being in charge of my own ship and getting to design with great intention what I want a chocolate events and education company to be. I have incorporated everything from simple things like just making sure that when people come on a chocolate tour in a neighborhood in Boston, that they have fun. And maybe there's not as much learning that goes on in that sort of event. Maybe it's a little more socially focused. But everyone should have at least one new thing that they get to leave the tour with, in addition to a full belly from all the treats they get. Or if it's when we do programming and we bring our chocolate tasting events and educational lectures to spaces. So we've done them in places like this. We've done them in offices, libraries, historical societies, even private homes and things. When we do those, I always make sure that while that has a lot more education involved, that I'm always relating it in ways that I don't condescend or dumb down material, because chocolate is surprisingly complex, and people are often surprised at how much there is that they didn't know. But I always let people know that if you didn't know, what you should be finding now is not a retroactive feeling of, oh gosh, all this time I had blinders on or I didn't know what I was looking at, but instead have this idea of, I was merely the person that opened the door and said, look what's waiting for you to explore. And hopefully people feel like in some metaphysical way I'm taking them by the hand and leading them through to how often in life do we get the opportunity to realize that there is a whole world that we didn't know that was waiting for us, to expand our appreciation of something, and especially something like chocolate that excites people just from the mention of the word. So it's something that has involved so many different facets of what I feel is my part to play. And I have said to folks many times at an event where folks have said things to me that have been more meaningful than you might anticipate, because I think if you are excited by chocolate, it's first with the idea of, oh, I'm gonna taste stuff and it's gonna be yummy and it's gonna be good, and that's fine. But when I have folks that come to me afterwards and say things like, they brought their mom to an event as a birthday treat, and someone comes up to me and says something like, I can't tell you why, but I haven't seen my mom smile like that in a really long time. Thank you. Or a family that loses someone. See, do you have flood insurance here? I'll be right. People that have lost someone that came on a chocolate tour and said, that is going to be a happy memory for us for the rest of our lives. So I'll never get to do something as important as curing cancer or finding world peace, something that, will really change the world. But while it seems very surface level, I do feel that chocolate has enabled me to contribute what I can in terms of putting my creativity, my good intentions, and my desire to create intentional joy. And to let people know that making space for that is some of the most important things we can also do for ourselves. Because intentional joy means that you give yourself the space and permission to take that time and let yourself feel happy before you go out into the world. And maybe that difference gets calculated through we're a little more patient when we're in traffic. You know, we don't lean on the horn quite as much. Maybe, you know, we let people go ahead of us at the checkout line at the grocery store. We make sure to hold the door. Whatever those little things are, I do what I do because I want to be the change I wish to see. And if I can help remind people through just the exercise of tasting chocolate to also let yourself be that change through that joyful intention, then I'm grateful to get to play that part. So I know that folks probably have questions for me, but I also wanted to ask a question of the group here, if we could by a show of hands. This is not a scientific poll, so you can raise your hand more than once if you need to. But amongst your chocolate choices, who here would say most of the time they are a dark chocolate kind of person? Very good, very good. Who here would say most of the time they're more of a milk chocolate kind of person? Very assertive. I did say it wasn't scientific, that's totally fine. Who here would say most of the time they're more of a white chocolate kind of person? All right, so I know everyone was looking around when we said each one, but I want to tell you this always is how I open a lot of our chocolate tasting events, and there's always a really interesting correlation, and it held up here too. The dark chocolate people, who are they again? All right, the personalities. You notice about the dark chocolate lovers? Boom, right here. I am a real chocoholic. What's your percentage? We're the snobbiest of the chocolate. It's okay. There's worse things to be snobby about, right? But never have to coax a dark chocolate lover to admit. And you can compare percentages later. The milk chocolate people are a little more self-assured. They don't brag as much as the dark chocolate lovers, but still very confident because you're like, no, actually, I'm the real chocoholic because I like the stuff that's the most popular, the most traditional. And then what happened with the white chocolate lovers?
Karen.
But y'all looked around, because this is when the milk chocolate lovers also get snobby, like, they're not. And Karen is actually a little bit out of sync with some, because a lot of the white chocolate lovers, when I do this, tend to go, don't tell anyone we're here. They don't even think we belong in the chocoholic tent. Because how many times do we hear that white chocolate's not really chocolate, right? How many folks have heard that? Karen's gonna do my job for me. She's down for professional development, I know. So I wouldn't be right for me not to leave you with some chocolate info that you didn't know before. But we do a lot of myth busting, especially in our chocolate tasting events. And I am going to have a couple people come up and we're going to do a little bit on the spot tasting. But for white chocolate, I want you all to know that the myth that white chocolate isn't really chocolate is a myth. It is not strictly the case. The reason why this myth exists is because there are legal labeling parameters as to what can be called chocolate and what can't. And it is actually the FDA that decides this. They are the official arbiters of a lot of food labeling. So in chocolate, this is true as well. But what they consider to be chocolate has to do with cocoa butter, which is the good natural fat that comes from the cocoa bean. And in white chocolate, that should be the primary ingredient. However, cocoa butter is also really useful in body care products. If you go home later, look in your toiletries, you'll have hand cream, body lotion, sometimes hair conditioner. It says contains real cocoa butter. That's the same fat coming from the same bean we use to make chocolate. In body care, cocoa butter has a 300% markup rate. So if you're a confectionery company that does not care so much about the quality of your candies, you will absolutely sell off the cocoa butter and use an artificial replacement in the candy, the confectionery. Unfortunately, most of the time that is oil or paraffin, which is edible wax, which is a petroleum-based product. So if you've ever had waxy chocolate, that left a funny film in your mouth. If you ever bought your chocolate from Dollar Tree, you've had this. But a lot of folks will have white chocolate and go, oh, it was waxy and it was too sweet. And if that's what white chocolate is, I'm never eating it again, because that was awful. If that has been your only experience with white chocolate, you have probably never had real white chocolate, because good white chocolate is not waxy, it is creamy, and it has a nice, soft, clean melt, and does not have to be cloying. The reason why the waxy stuff is so sweet, they're trying to distract you from the unpleasant mouthfeel. So I'd like to pick one person from each table to come up, and we're going to have you try some real white chocolate. So naturally, Karen. Who else would like to come up? Here, Joy in the white, yeah, in the black shirt there, and then in this table. One more. Come on up.
You tell us all about it. Oh, wow. Trust me. It's white chocolate. I don't want to have a chocolate tasting now. Like a group chocolate tasting. We should put one together.
So, I know this is terrible to the rest of you. I just wanted to do a little demo. So, this is the takeaway that you all will be able to bring home with you, or if you want to have Cocoa Beantown come to a tasting event. The proper way to eat chocolate of any kind, not just white chocolate, but any kind, is that just like if you've gone to a wine tasting and learned about the sniff and the swirl and the swish and the spit, first of all, spitting is not a part of chocolate tasting ever. So points for chocolate tasting. But what you're actually going to do is first take the piece that I gave you and break it near your ear and listen for the snap. Believe it or not, it would be funny if I just made that up and had them do something. But the sound of chocolate, what they just did is called the snap test. It is something that chocolate judges use at the International Chocolate Awards, other tasting events, and chocolate awards, because when you have chocolate that has paraffin in it, what do you think would happen if you applied the snap test? It won't snap. It will bend. It will flex. So while it can't give you total insight, the snap test on a chocolate bar can start to give you an indicator of, okay, I think this might be made of quality. Now you have a fresh edge, smell it. So you start to get some of those anticipatory, things going on in your palate. And here's the final bit. Make sure the piece is small enough that you feel comfortable putting it on your tongue and letting it melt. So you're not going to chew it. So once you have a piece if you need to break it more, go ahead, but put it on your tongue and you're going to let it melt. Now, not only does this get people to be quiet a little bit, but what we're doing when we do not chew our chocolate, we let it melt, is we allow the cocoa butter to come to our body temperature. Fat in food is a flavor delivery device. If you chew your chocolate, you do not give the cocoa butter time to unveil all the nuance that is crafted into a well-made chocolate bar. It allows you to get the mouthfeel, and personally, this might resonate with some of you, the most important reason to me for allowing us to have that melt experience, use that technique for tasting our chocolate, is what I said about intentional joy. When I have a piece of chocolate, that's for me. It's professional development, luckily, but also it's for me. It's for me to have a moment. If that's about having joy for myself, why would I want to rush through that? Why would I not want to make that moment last as long as possible? It shouldn't feel like snacking. It shouldn't feel like eating. What we're doing is mindfully tasting. And so sometimes folks even close their eyes. I love it at a tasting event, especially when it's a virtual one and people are on camera and they're just kind of like, it's kind of groovy, I love it. But you really allow yourself, it might take a little reprogramming. You might always have chewed your chocolate before, but when you have a well-made piece of chocolate, slowing down and letting it melt really opens up a lot of things. So I would just love to hear folks' opinion. What do we think of that white chocolate? Karen used a really big piece. Yeah, very good.
So good. It has a lemony taste to it.
Yeah, so this is from a company based in Massachusetts called Boho Chocolate. They're actually based in Florence, Massachusetts. The owner's name is Charlie, which I believe legally he has to own a chocolate factory. But this is what a well-made piece of white chocolate, and it's a lemon olive oil white chocolate bar. So you get that nice citrus flavor set against the really creamy but clean melt, right? No one should have anything waxy or oily once it's done melting, right? You're not having that cloying sweetness. It's just a nice balance of flavor. And for folks that, if you had never let a piece of chocolate melt like that before, was there anything revelatory that came across, or just new thoughts?
I agree with you about the joy of just going with the moment and enjoying, instead of just chewing it so fast.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed the chocolate, yeah.
Good, nice.
It's a nice way to eat chocolate. And
Yeah.
I love chocolate, dark chocolate, milk chocolate, just chocolate in general. I'm very associated with them, my family and friends, but I would never go with white chocolate. I mean, my husband makes this even chocolate.
I converted her.
But this is not all chocolate. This is
Right.
not all white chocolate. You really have to get a good white chocolate.
Amazing.
Yeah, yeah. So do we have some folks that maybe, would not have gone for white chocolate before, that if they had one like this?
I raised my hand for white chocolate because I love white chocolate, but I've never had anything like this. So I wasn't really eating what I thought was white chocolate.
Mhm.
It was always sickly sweet, which is maybe why I liked it. I wasn't sure. But this is like delightful.
Right.
It's sweet. I love the citrus.
Nice, good to hear too. Well, thank you. Go have a seat. So I'm thanking to my assistants. They can also share their experiences at the table too, if it's not teasing you anymore. But wanted to open the floor up to questions that folks have for me about anything chocolate or my experiences or...
Victoria, can you give your website out, please?
Yes, it's www.cocobeantown.com.
I think we all need to go and have a.
That could be our next trip.
What's your favorite kind of dinner to put on?
My fatal flaw is that I can't shut up about chocolate. So I do enjoy when I do tasting events for people that aren't expecting what they're getting, as in folks that have not had experiences with craft chocolate, folks that say to me things like, you know, oh, I'm a huge chocoholic, I love Oreos. And I go, oh, there's room to improve. But I also have had, since we've been re-emerging, our pandemic pivot was virtual tasting events. So when everything got shut down and we couldn't do tours, we couldn't do the in-person tasting events, everything, you know, gathering groups of people couldn't do it, we had to pivot to, all right, virtual tasting events. So all the companies, everyone was working from home. They still needed to have things to do as a group. We would curate chocolate kits, mail them to folks, and then everyone would get on Zoom and we'd guide them through a chocolate tasting. And that expanded our reach because it went from, you know, prior to that we had just brought events maybe through other parts of New England the furthest, but it was really, you know, very localized. And suddenly, if you had an internet access and someone could ship to you, FedEx or UPS or USPS could get things to you, we could do an event. And so suddenly Cocoa Beantown actually went international, and we have 5-continent coverage in terms of where we've sent chocolate kits to. But thank you. Thank you. It was, you know, trial by fire. You had to figure out something to do. Since that happened, I realized this is something that can work in so many different settings. And last year we received placement in a programming cohort in the Fenway neighborhood of Boston, and we're given grant money to develop social programming for programming space they have there. And we actually did chocolate tasting picnics, so outdoors, seated picnic style, but with social intention. So one night we did one, it was a speed dating one. So we sat on someone's picnic blanket and did a tasting, and then we had the gentleman move to another picnic blanket after each tasting. And we got written up in Boston Magazine because the guy said, bars aren't for everyone, so the bar scene is not for everyone. So how about go to a chocolate tasting outdoors, enjoy a beautiful night, taste chocolate, and maybe you meet someone. We did the same thing a couple weeks later, and then it was meet a new adult friend. And not in the sketchy way, just like, you know, just this idea of, there are a lot of folks in Boston that work really long hours, but maybe your coworkers aren't your vibe so much. People aren't necessarily involved in churches as much. Not everyone has kids. So how do you make connections with other adults that you can just become friends with? Because so many people come to Boston for a job and then don't have a social network. And so I thought, make this as low threshold as possible in terms of you can't lose. You'll come, and if you make friends, it's because you know you started out with at least one very solid thing in common. Loving chocolate is a great way to build a relationship. All of my best relationships have been entirely chocolate-based. Really. but the idea of come out and do this, and if you get a new friend or a phone number or a date or just have a couple of laughs, at the very least, you got to taste some good chocolate, and that was a win even that in and of itself. So I've really, my word earlier was creatively inspired. I really am relishing this idea now, especially emerging from a global trauma event that we've all lived through? We have. Just kind of realizing that really we can do whatever we think, give your ideas an opportunity to flourish. And even if no one's heard of it before, because no one's done anything like that before that you've seen or heard of, it might be just the thing that a group of people come and say, wow, okay, this really worked for us, and how did you come up with it? And go, I don't know, but it's a thing now. We made it a thing. So, and chocolate is just the right vehicle for that, although I could see it working in, maybe other food-related things or hobbies sort of activities, but again, I'm lucky that specifically with chocolate, it's something that just the word, and people get excited. So I do have that advantage. Other questions?
I have 2 questions.
Sure.
What is your favorite chocolate? Is it a dark chocolate or a milk chocolate or a white chocolate or a mix of all 3?
Dark chocolate. I have always been a dark chocolate girl, which is weird because normally when you're a kid, you start in milk and then kind of graduate. And this is the other thing, my dark chocolate friends, we always think when we move to the dark side, which is a good thing in the chocolate world, we go, oh, I'm so sophisticated now. That's also why we get snobby about it, because we go, oh, I'm so sophisticated now because I like dark chocolate, and I didn't as a kid because I was so immature, but some people said to me, well, don't you like dark chocolate as you get older because you become more bitter with age? No, that's not the case, actually. It's actually a biological imperative why you typically don't like dark chocolate as a kid. Bitter flavors in nature are also akin to poisons. So as the biology as a child thinks you're not smart enough to not know you shouldn't eat poison. So we were bitter flavors off the table. So as a child, you don't like dark chocolate, which has theobromine, which is a stimulant like caffeine, but you also don't like alcohol, you don't like coffee, you don't like tea, you don't like all these other things. And as you get older, biology says, well, you're probably old enough to eat stuff that's okay. But I've always liked dark chocolate. My favorite pairing, though, is white chocolate with champagne or Prosecco, which is a pairing most folks don't think of, but pairings are best when they're transformative. And a white chocolate with a Prosecco or champagne, it's a good day.
That sounds pretty good.
Yeah, people always go to milk or dark with red, which are wonderful, but good, well-made white chocolate. Actually, everyone remembers the scene in Pretty Woman where Richard Gere has the bucket of strawberries and a bottle of champagne, and he's like, taste the strawberries, it'll make the champagne, so he's putting the moves on. Good white chocolate covered strawberries with champagne or Prosecco. Request that for Valentine's Day and tell them you know the good white chocolate when that's a really, really excellent. Talk about really transformative. Everything's going to work together to enhance and bring out flavors that weren't there before. You have a second question?
Well, on your tours, are you going into places in Boston, into bakeries, restaurants?
Yeah, the tours are basically, if anyone's ever done a food tour, it's a chocolate-focused food tour. So we're going into chocolate shops in some neighborhoods. Not every neighborhood in Boston that we do tours has dedicated chocolate shops, but go into dedicated chocolate shops, but also, a bakery that does an amazing chocolate chip cookie, which is our state cookie, by the way. One that has devil's food cake truffles, or a good brownie or cup of ice cream, or whatever it might be. And people get to hear about what's special about the item, if there is history, like with the chocolate chip cookie, and then they get to have that item. There's opportunities to shop if it's that sort of like a boutique or something. And it's about 2.5 hours of chocolate eating, give or take, if you're a quick or slow walker, but it's not a bad way to spend an afternoon. A lot of that is interesting because the groups that come through are distinct with times of year. Summer is tourist season in Boston, so it's when we get the folks from most far-flung areas. But rest of the year, it's more local. However, we get mixed groups where you have a local that's brought a family member or a friend that's visiting, because the local doesn't want to do the duck tour. They go, I don't want to quack, I hear them all the time, I don't want to walk the Freedom Trail end to end, no thank you. We'll go do the chocolate tour, we'll all get fed, I'll be happy, you'll get some history and some sightseeing. And so we fill that niche really nicely. And what's nice is that because summer for the chocolate shops is their kind of slow season, we're also helping to bring folks into those places when, June, July, August, people aren't thinking about chocolate shopping because the holidays associated with chocolate are in the fall and winter and spring. So it's an interesting to kind of have it's tourism plus chocolate plus events plus. And we'll get bachelorettes that book those, as we do private tourism, you can do bachelorettes or family reunion or date night. I actually got an inquiry from a gentleman that wants to book one just for him and his wife as an anniversary, so private tour, just the two of them. But because chocolate's so celebratory too, a lot of people associate, let's get that in, let's make sure we get that chocolate in. Other questions I can answer?
Do you have a favorite shop in Boston or
A favorite shop in Boston? For chocolate? So in Boston proper, we actually don't have a lot of local chocolatiers. The people that are locally making chocolate are more in like Belmont and Somerville and Quincy and things like that. But in Boston proper, we are lucky to have a place called Teuscher Chocolates of Switzerland. And they actually directly import there's a plane from Zurich that comes once a week that brings over their chocolate. So shy of getting on a plane and going, getting authentic Swiss chocolate. And their family happened to invent the champagne truffle. We do a lot of professional development with those. but it's nice because unlike some other companies that say they're Swiss, but they're actually made in New Hampshire, this is, it's the real happy Swiss cows they use for the milk, the real Dom Perignon they use in the champagne, and it's a different thing. And caveat, good quality chocolate is pricier than the stuff at the grocery store checkout line. It's a hard economy right now. My luck of getting to write it off on my taxes notwithstanding, it's also the thing that really makes me happy. So it's the thing that I will always choose. It's worth it to me to get the better quality stuff. Not everyone can or wants to make that same decision, but to me, I do enjoy the fact that when you get the higher quality chocolate, you actually don't need to eat as much of it at one time because it's very satisfying in the first taste. If you have to eat a lot of handfuls of something before you feel like you fixed a craving, to me I go, is the business model that we'll make something that's not as satisfying but sell it cheaper so people will buy more of it to feel satisfied? It's an interesting sort of methodology.
All right, that's all we have time for.
Yeah.
Let's give our quick round.
I want to thank Victoria. I had a great honor to talk to her ahead of time, and the presentation was amazing. I learned a lot more about chocolate. Thank you for picking me. I am now going to make a white chocolate snob, and I apologize now for the white hugs on your table after I ate that white piece of chocolate. So it was amazing. So thank you so much, Victoria. It was great. Let's give her another big round of applause. I'm going to wrap up quickly. We want to give away a bottle of wine today, but a couple of things I want to put on your radar. So September 20th, if you've not registered for the big event that we're having with the Worcester Chamber and us, it's all about networking. It's right back here, September 20th from 5 to 7:30 p.m. Right now, I sent out something this morning. There's well over 150 people registered. If you want to network, please come do that. On September 28th, we're having our 4th annual BFF golf outing and clinic. There's only 4 spots left. This sells out every year. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more about golf, some great camaraderie with women, a nice lunch, and 9 holes of golf, please sign up right away because it is a sellout event for us, and we're going to have this day turn into what this is now. So please join us for that. And one of the things that you all tell us about BFF is obviously our amazing guest speakers and obviously the opportunity to network. So we're working very hard on planning our speaker program for the year. And I'm also so excited that we got the chance to meet Victoria today, and I'm definitely going to go talk to my friends about a tour. That we are having our BFF calendar updates has already been scheduled. We are going to send those all out to you so you can mark your calendars. Will be Wednesday, October 11th next month because of the Columbus Day holiday. But I'm excited to share with you that we are bringing a fashion icon and philanthropist as our guest speaker. Her name is Yolanda Salucci. She is 88 years old, and throughout the 20th century, Yolanda became a household name throughout the region and a shorthand for glitz and glamour. Many of you might remember this or not, but Yolanda built a wedding empire for over 41 years. She happens to be Carlene's mother's best friend. She has an eye for all things dazzling. She will be head to toe all in white, and she happened to influence so many women's lives, encouraging them to embrace their own power and unapologetically command attention as they stepped out into the world. She was the owner of Yolanda's wedding empire, and I've only heard about it, I've never been in there, but also because of her philanthropy, she hosted so many shows and galas and showcasing her merchandise, which is actually was on display at the Peabody Museum Institute, and she's raised lots of monies for charities, and she has, for years, influenced Boston society pages for decades. She continues to make an impression through her own cable access TV show called and she, just like I said, she published her autobiography, Beyond the Glitz and Glamour, and she wrote a series of children's books because she lost her daughter to cancer, who was a model, and so the books are in her daughter's memory called Lindy Lou and Her Dancing Shoes. You will not want to miss our next event.